And I not only asked the question, I've been on a quest to try to find that out for a long time. And some of the answers seem to be presenting themselves over and over again. And it's interesting that the source of liberation leadership that I have seen, for example, I find a disproportionate share of liberation leadership in America comes from the Caribbean. A disproportionate share comes from the Caribbean. It comes from Jamaica. It comes from Trinidad. It comes from Grenada. I'm just asking, when I say that, you can put the names on it, can't you? It comes from Guyana. Now check me out and see if I'm wrong. Did not Garvey come from Jamaica? You see? Did not Garvey articulate a self-determination direction for African people? Not a dependency, but a self-determination direction. Did not Walter Rodney come from Guyana? Did he not make an analysis of our condition in his book, How Europe Underdeveloped America, that would allow us to repair the difficulty? In other words, the reversal of what he revealed is where we have to go. If we were developed and then got underdeveloped, then the pathway to underdevelopment, is also the pathway back to development. You have to reverse everything that happened, you'll be back where you started. Did not George G.M. James come from Guyana? Okay. George G.M. James came from Guyana and wrote Stolen Legacy, many of you know that, and reframed the historical debate that has not ended until this moment. Okay. Did not Jan Carew and Ivan Van Sertima come from Guyana? And what is Guyana? Except a haven for Africans, you see, a place, an Africa house, as it were, where African people could do African business, and where they produce some of the finest independent thinkers that have come anywhere from the Western Hemisphere. Follow Garvey, and then you look at liberation movements in the United States. For example, how many people know the difference between the civil rights movement and liberation movement? Some people think they're the same. Well, the civil rights movement, actually they are in a way. Civil rights movement is a kind of liberation movement. It's a freedom movement, but it's not what I'm. It's a necessary, but not a sufficient step. If I can state it that way. To be able to go to the Marriott is necessary, but that's not sufficient. Even to be able to vote is necessary, but not sufficient. Having in mind why I'm voting and a purpose toward which I'm heading, that is sufficient, as well as necessary. And so I asked the question, what is the movement that is a liberation movement? And then if you begin to ask it in that way, you ask questions like, when have African people in this country mobilized themselves? When have people of African descent been mobilized as people of African descent to work on people of African descent's problems? When has that happened? Well, there's been one mass mobilization of African people in this century. Only one in the United States of America. And that mass mobilization occurred in the 20s under the leadership of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Millions of people of African descent worldwide were mobilized. A lot of people know Garvey's name, but don't know his works. And what does that mean? I'm saying if you were to put on the map, even of Africa, the places where there was a Universal Negro Improvement Association. What if I put pins on the map? That might be a good exercise for us to do for ourselves and for the children. And if you were to put on the map in the Western Hemisphere, the places where the Universal Negro Improvement Association established itself, that was an organization of African people that was designed to provide mental and physical liberation through education, through economic development, and you know they did move ahead on both of those, establishing a university, a curriculum, establishing, in one case, a shipping company. You understand what I'm saying? But if we would have put the map, the pinpoints on the map, I wonder how many of our children would know that one of the pins has to go here. And that the foundation of the ANC is the UNIA. How many would know that the pinpoint has to go here? That Osayefe Kwame Nkrumah said, out of all the books that he read when he was in the United States of America, the one book that influenced him more than any other book was the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey. How many know that a pen would have to go here in Kenya? Because Jomo Kenyatta said the same thing that Marcus Garvey said. You see what I'm saying? And that's not all. In other words, you will find in almost every African country the colors red, green, and black. So I'm saying that that's a world reach for a movement that had its center in the United States of America by a short man who came from Jamaica. And it spread into Panama. You would have to have a pen in Panama. You would have to have a pen all around the Caribbean. And then, of course, you'd have to have a pen in New York and Detroit, and Chicago, and all those places where the Nation of Islam grew, because the Nation of Islam grew out of the Garvey movement. And that the influence of the ideas of the Garvey movement still stimulate the thoughts of people. The basic concept of self-determination and self-help. Do it for yourself. That very basic concept, that's the message that came from the mouth of Marcus Garvey in the 20s. You know, that's what he was up to. Take charge, you know, no grants, no loans, you know, do it yourself, because then there's no strings attached. There's no external direction. This is one of the things that Dr. Ben has said. I mean, I remember when we had an ASCAC meeting in New York, and the New York people put it on, and Dr. Ben dominated the planning process for New York. And the one thing that he would not permit, I mean, it couldn't even come up for discussion. The one thing he wouldn't permit was that one penny be offered from any, be accepted from any source to put on the ASCAC conference other than the membership of ASCAC or the African community. That's the only place money could come from. He said, don't you need money? Of course they needed money. In fact, they also said that they will not spend one penny of money outside the African community unless they absolutely have to. They held their conference not in a hotel. People stayed in houses. They catered food. They had it on the campus of City College of New York. And that's the only ASCAC conference that has made $30,000. $30,000. And in the African way, even though it was raised in New York, it was split with all the other ASCAC chapters to see the independent effort that they needed to make in their own community. I mean, you can understand how powerful the concept is if it's acted upon. And if it were continually acted upon, we wouldn't be in any trouble at all. We would be able to do everything that we needed to do. So this was a beautiful example of a model. So if you ask yourself again the question, where is the leadership, the liberation leadership of African people? Where does it come from? Historically, where does it come from? Let's ask the question of Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey. Let's ask, who were they? Let's ask the question of Blyden. Let's ask the question of others. And what we begin to find is that in common, many of these people still had African memories. I'm talking about direct African memories. My father was from X. You know, in fact, I was trying to think of the physician, not Walker, back in the the physician who was in the war and went back to Africa. I don't know why I'm blocking on her name right now, but at any rate, when I think of it, I'll say it again. His father was Mandingo. His father was Mandingo. Everybody knows what that means, right? Mandingo. Another word for Mandingo is bookman. That name should be familiar to us too. Bookman means bookman, man of the book. So Mandingo were the people of the book in West Africa. And the people of the book in West Africa that's that whole intellectual core in West Africa that we know about. The Mandingos, related to the Wolof, related to other people in Mali and so forth. There's that whole crowd of people who identify themselves as thinkers. We knew them in Liberia as Mandingos. Everybody knew their history and they knew that that's how you regarded these people. They had a special mystique about them, the Mandingos. That word Mandingo, or in another form, bookman, should be familiar to us for another reason. Answering the question, what is the source of liberation leadership? Haiti. The revolution in Haiti was started by the liberation that freed the Haitians. Was started first, Macandal, an African priest who did what? Retreated into the woods and did business as African family. Am I right? Bookman, closer to Tucson. Mandingo, bookman, intellect, priest, professor, is the person who called a meeting where? In the woods. In Boyke, my forest. They didn't have their meeting in public. They had their meeting in the woods. Why? Because they had to do family business. That's liberation leadership. And then they picked Tucson out of the woods. Tucson was anointed by Africans who looked at him and said, you have a job of liberation to do. And we pick you not even because you're the leader. You haven't conceptualized this. We pick you because you have the skills in handling human beings, the mentality. You have all of those kind of things. With us backing you, we can do great things. They did.